Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I got historian Brian Domitrovic. He's a professor and the chair of the history department at Sam Houston State University and a great advocate of economic liberty, and delighted to have him on the program. Brian, welcome to the program today. How are you?
It's great to be here, Kevin.
Tell us a little bit about your background, and you talk a lot about economics, but your PhD is in history, and you chair the history department. Is your degrees in economic history? Was that your focus?
Yeah, I studied at Harvard University with the great economic historian David Landis, who wrote The Wealth and Poverty of Nations. And back in the late 1990s, I was astonished that nobody was writing a history of the Reagan Revolution in economics, which of course changed everything for the better. So I decided in the early 2000s, I'm going to write the history of the Reagan Revolution in economics, and it came out in 2009. It's called Iconoclasts. It's a history of supply-side economics.
Yeah, I love it. It's fantastic. And tell me a little bit about, how does someone like you, of course your degree is in history, that helps, but you went to a place like Harvard. I got to believe it's hard to not walk out as a statist in your worldview going to a place like that.
Hey, you know where else I went? I went to Columbia University in the city of New York for college. And you know who taught there? Robert Mundell, who was Arthur Laffer's sidekick, who invented supply-side economics in the 1970s. Nobody had ever heard of Mundell at Columbia. That's how buried he was. He won the Nobel Prize later in 1999. Everyone was just trying to suppress it. Forget about Reaganomics. Forget about it. It's succeeding too well. No, I was astonished. Nobody was talking about this stuff, and it was right there. So I decided I had to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Someone needed to do it, no question about it. Murray Rothbard, didn't he teach over at Columbia as well, or is that where he got his Ph.D.?
Yeah, Milton Friedman got his Ph.D. at Columbia, and Murray Rothbard maybe from NYU with Ludwig von Mises, because von Mises was at NYU for many years. NYU refused to pay his salary, so it had to be paid by a private foundation. So it was all there in New York City.
Yeah, it was really interesting. That's an interesting development. So you got exposed to economic history and from a free market perspective, which I think is phenomenal. You got to love that. When did you graduate, by the way?
From college. Just went to my 25th reunion in 1989, and I got my PhD in 2000.
Yeah, very good. So tell me a little bit about your work here at Sam Houston State, right down the road.
Yeah, so I'm the chairman of the history department here, and I'm the historian of supply-side economics. It seems even to this day, no professional historian, the American Historical Association lists 20,000 of them in this country alone, wants to talk about the history of the Reagan Revolution in economics. The reason is it was so successful. And so I continue to pump out this history, and just this coming October, I'm publishing the collected works of Arthur Laffer of Laffer Curve fame.
Yeah, absolutely. Laffer's been on my show a couple of times over the years, and his sidekick, my very, very good friend, Steve Moore, has been on my show more times than I can count. He actually wrote the foreword to a book I wrote back in the 80s, and very awesome advocate. I'm sure you're familiar with Steve as well.
Yeah, no, I knew Steve from his Wall Street Journal and now his Heritage Foundation days. He wrote a great review of my book, Iconoclasts, in the Claremont Review of Books, and he's simply one of the clearest, most articulate expositors of what we need to do in the free market area.
I couldn't help but notice this week in the news, this morning, in fact, that the French government has collapsed. The socialist government has collapsed. Resignations coming left and right over a long-term stagnant economy. This is really, it epitomizes socialist governments, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, here's a government that came in saying, guns a-blazing, we're going to have a 75% marginal tax rate on high earners. Well, in a place like Europe where you can just move somewhere else, it is the European Union now, then people just get out. And it took them this long to realize that. And we're going to be on that road. We were on that road in the 1970s. We'll get on it again if we decide to jack up our marginal tax rates some more.
No question about it. No question about it. Talking about tax rates, obviously that's a big part of the strategy. Our problem, if you will, when it comes to government. Monetary policy, that's a huge issue as well. You've been talking a lot about that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how poor monetary policy has been through this Great Recession and even prior to that. I mean, monetary policy really only had one season in the sun, and that's when the dollar was linked to gold, usually when it was converted to gold. I mean, since 1971, when the United States went off the gold standard, monetary policy has simply been lousy. It's been particularly lousy in 2 decades, the 1970s and then the long 2000s. The only reason it was any good in the 1980s and 1990s is that we had tax cuts and deregulation, and people really wanted this money that the Fed was printing. Now that we have tax increases and the regulatory explosion, no one wants the money the Fed is printing, and still they're printing it. And so it goes into gold and oil and all these hedges instead of job-producing enterprises.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'm looking, by the way, at your resume, your background. I noticed you were at Grove City College for a while. That's a great bastion of economic freedom.
There's no question about it. Grove City is one of the few colleges in the United States, it's in western Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh, that does not accept one dime of federal money. And so therefore, they're able to do anything they want. And they have this wonderful free market tradition. And they actually hold the papers of Ludwig von Mises, the great oracle of Austrian economics in the 20th century. And it was really great to be able to read the primary documents of von Mises there at Grove City.
Yeah. I guess them and Hillsdale College are about the only schools that I can immediately think of that are like that, and it makes so much sense. It's kind of a warning to anyone who wants to get government funding of private schools for below college level. I mean, it's a pretty pernicious, pretty dangerous game. Don't you think about it in light of what the choices that Hillsdale and Grove City College made?
Hey, yeah, and let me warn you, the federal government is really trying to get them to bend anyway. Ted Kennedy, before he died, kept trying to get the courts to force Grove City to adhere to federal guidelines, even though they weren't taking federal money. The Grove City had to take that suit to the Supreme Court, and they won. One more thing about Grove City. It's amazingly inexpensive. It's one of the most affordable private colleges in the country, and the secret is they don't take federal money.
Yeah, I think Bob Jones probably doesn't either, now that I think about it.
Yeah, there are probably a few more, but you could use your hands to count them.
Yeah, absolutely. People have got to realize whatever the government funds, it tries to control. And in the case of education, they try to control it even when they don't fund it. So got to always be very concerned about that. Brian, I thank you so much for being with us. And I'm really excited that someone like you is the chair of that department. Do you have many students working in the area of economic history there at Sam Houston?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to find them, coming out of the woodwork. I'm offering a seminar next semester on the history of supply-side economics. I have a lot of primary documents that a lot of the major players, from Arthur Laffer to Alan Reynolds to Robert Bartley, have given me, and we're going to start putting them together and putting them online. And you can see how these ideas germinated in the 1970s and the 1980s. Says, we are going to get the dollar back as good as gold. We are going to cut taxes, get regulation down, and guess what? They did it. It's one of the most phenomenal success stories in modern American history.
Are you going to be offering that as a graduate course or undergraduate?
That's a graduate course.
It's going to be a graduate course, and is that going to be purely in the classroom in Huntsville, or is that going to be done online as well?
I'm going to do it both. I'm going to have it in the classroom in the Woodlands at our Woodlands Center, and I'm also going to do it online.
I might have to beg you to let me take it. But anyway, so yeah, that would be awesome. My undergraduate degree is in history, and I did graduate work, and I would love to take a course like that. That's cool. Brian, thanks so much for being with us.
Kevin, great to be here.
Brian Domitrovic, he is the chair of the Department of History at Sam Houston State University. Delighted to have him on the program. I got a feeling we're going to have him back on the program again. Check him out over there at shsu.edu. Look up Brian Domitrovic. I am Kevin Price, and this is The Price of Business.